Good morning or afternoon or evening if you're watching on the replay. How is everyone doing today? I hope you are having a great morning and a good start to the day. But if you're not, don't worry, because the rest of the day can get better. I am Duncan Price from Mind Affinity, and I'm here to talk to you about different cognitive biases. At every 9:30 every Thursday, I go live to talk about a different cognitive bias. What is a cognitive bias? Well, it's a shortcut that we take to help us make faster decisions and, unfortunately, not always better ones. See, in simplicity, our brain, there's two main systems within our brain. System one, the impulsive, older, primal brain that's interested in quick answers and survival and all of that jazz. And then system two, which is the rational, logical brain, the frontal cortex, the part that deals in reason and logic and communication. And the two don't always get on very well. And system one's designed to be quick and impulsive and give you an answer straight away. Unfortunately, it's not designed to do its fact-checking and to be accurate. And so often what happens is we make those quick decisions using our system one brain, and our system two brain then finds a way to justify why we were right in doing that, rather than questioning if that's actually the right idea or decision or action to take anyway. So there's loads of different cognitive biases, and today I'm talking about authority bias. And authority bias is a really interesting one, a really simple one that surrounds us all the time. It has so much influence on what we do, who we listen to, what we believe, how we form our beliefs and opinions over time. It has an impact on us growing up, but it still has an impact on us today. And it's leveraged and used in all sorts of different ways to influence us, to make different decisions. So what is it? Well, it's quite simple, really. Someone who's in a position of authority, we are more likely to believe them. We give more weight, more importance to the things that they say, and we assume, often wrongly, that they deserve the authority that they're in, and that we should listen and take on board more of what they say. Now, in some ways, that makes perfect sense and is very useful. You know, an expert that spent years studying a particular field, who's risen to a point where he's known as an authority in that field, or she, fantastic, absolutely. There's a good chance that what they say holds more weight, and you're right to give that more weight than some stranger on the internet, or some person that's done their research on YouTube. Not that there's anything wrong with YouTube, it's just a platform, it depends where you look. So sometimes it's useful, but other times it's really not, particularly if someone's got to a position of authority in one field or in one area that doesn't necessarily transfer their expertise or knowledge to something else. For example, someone who becomes, the President of the United States of America doesn't necessarily have a clue about medical stuff. So when he tells you to drink bleach, well, he's not wrong. It will cure the problem, but it'll also do a number on the human that's drinking it. Maybe that was an example that I should avoid talking about at this time. But yeah, so a great example of this that I've used myself, actually, when I was younger, and I'm not saying that you should, it's very naughty, but a great example of this is the power of a clipboard. A clipboard and a high-vis jacket will get you in anywhere. There are certain restrictions, but yeah, generally speaking, if you put on a high-vis jacket and you carry a clipboard, you can do things and get away with going places that you just normally wouldn't get away with, because you look like you have a purpose to be there. You appear to have authority. And so therefore people assume that what you're doing is right and they let you do it. See, we're hardwired really to conform to social structure. Okay, we like structure, we like to have someone who's in charge, a leader to follow, or we like to work towards being that leader. Oh yes, lanyards too. Lanyards are very powerful in that sense. And so we like to have this structure because it kind of brings normalcy and it makes things easy to understand, and we can judge our place in things. So that's well and good, but actually it can also really be our undoing if we allow someone to have authority over us and our thoughts, our beliefs and our behaviours, where they don't necessarily have our best interests, or don't, they may have their own reasons for wanting us to follow a particular pattern of behaviour, for example. So being aware of that. Marketing and advertising is a great example of how this authority bias is used. If you watch any toothpaste advert, the dentists will be wearing lab coats and saying, yes, so many dentists have approved this. I mean, toothpaste is a good thing and it works great, but firstly, some of the language that they use is misleading on exactly what the claim is, but that's a whole other thing. But those dentists will be in lab coats, despite the fact that they might not actually ever wear lab coats in their job. But the actor or dentist that's on the advert will be wearing a lab coat because instantly we associate that with authority. They must be an expert. Why else would they wear a big white coat? Of course, they could just be wearing the big white coat so that we believe them to be an expert, so that we listen to them more. Another great example of this is I managed to convince an entire class of people that light bulbs don't actually emit light, they suck dark, which of course is a load of rubbish. It wasn't my idea, I got the idea from someone else. I was able to go into great depth about why this is true, and they believed me because they were led to believe that I was an expert in that field. I was not at all, and then afterwards explained how easy it is to fall into those traps of believing stuff. And yes, absolutely, sometimes people with authority do have people's best interests at heart. Absolutely, 100%. I'm not saying otherwise. I'm not saying we should just start a revolution and refuse to accept anyone's authority. You will respect my authority. So yeah, that's really what it is that we have a natural tendency. And it's interesting when you look at, because a lot of these biases that I talk about, some of them appear to be, and from studies seem to be, absolutely fundamental. Others are definitely more influenced by different cultures and cultural upbringing and such. And actually, this is an example where it's true in our Western world. Look at American political influencing and advertising in the run-up to campaigns, and there's an awful lot of it at play there. But it's also true, and it's actually more true in Eastern culture generally. Exceptions always apply. But studies show that it's actually a lot stronger of an impact and effect in Eastern countries, particularly sort of China, Japan, and that makes a lot of sense. Japan, if you think about it traditionally, it's always been everything for the empire and everything for the one. So there's been kind of a stronger hierarchy, I guess, for longer. From my limited perspective on it. So yeah, that's it. Authority bias is simply that we give more power to and listen to people that we believe to have authority. But here's the interesting part for me, and here's the thing that can really make a difference in everyday conversations, especially for those of you that are watching who are business owners, you do networking, or you have one-to-one calls with people. We sometimes perceive someone to be an authority, or simply just on a greater level to ourselves. Maybe they're more experienced, maybe they just dress better so it makes us feel that way, maybe they appear more confident. And we can go into a conversation with some other person having decided that they have greater authority than us. And we don't realise that we do this. We don't necessarily stop and think, yes, I think they're better than me. And it's not about being better necessarily, but we go into that conversation and go, I'm speaking to this person and this person. There's pressure on having a conversation with this person because they're an authority, and that's going to be challenging. And so actually what we do is when we have that conversation, we're making it more challenging for ourselves, because we have that perception, it absolutely does tie in with imposter syndrome. And there's a whole other video I've done about that, so do check it out. And yeah, it's really easy to influence ourselves to A, feel less comfortable, and B, not therefore lead the conversation, not therefore put across what we want to. And the other person very well may not be thinking about it that way. They may even be feeling the same way about you. When you take a moment beforehand to recognize that you're all people, it doesn't matter who you're talking to, whether it's the Queen of England, bless her, whether it's a 5-year-old child, whether it's a man, woman, from anywhere in the world, ultimately we're all just people. And if you can have a conversation with someone person to person on the level, you're likely to both gain a lot more from it. Sometimes that perception comes from the other person trying to give us that impression too. Absolutely. And in fact, there are sometimes and some people that will do that from a position of weakness. You know, they feel insecure about something or they feel unsure about something, and so their response is to show up louder and prouder. And so you go, oh, they've got it all together, but actually it's kind of hiding a weakness. But the weaknesses are good. They're what make you human, and they're useful. So yes, I'll get back on track and I'll sum this up. So authority bias is quite simply that we tend to give more weight to the opinions of people with authority, or people who we perceive to have authority. To the same extent, I could say something now during this video, and the chances are most people who are watching this are watching it because they know that I've got a pretty good understanding of cognitive biases. I do a whole series about it, and that I've spent a lot of time studying how the mind works and staying up until silly hours in the morning reading papers that have been published and peer-reviewed on how we think, because I'm sad. So I could quite easily say something about how the mind works right now, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, but you're more likely to believe that it is, especially because of the fact that I present real things based on evidence. And you'll notice that there are times in my videos where I point out that studies show this. Is very different to me saying this is absolute, because we're always learning, right? So be prepared to question everything. It's not unhealthy to be questioning. That doesn't mean being dismissive. It just means being prepared to check something out. If it's important, if you're going to make a decision based on something, check it out. Also be aware, this is kind of a whole other thing, but it relates to this bias. Also be aware that even when you know something to be false, that doesn't necessarily mean that you remember it as false. Okay? What I mean by that is if you're told a new piece of information, but you're also aware that it's fake, so fake news, for example, or when someone just repeats the same thing enough times until everyone starts believing it. What happens there is we create two bits of memory. One bit of memory that is, this is erroneous, it's an error, it's not true, and one bit of memory that is the story or fact or non-fact, bit of information that we were told. And although we know that that was made up, we know that it wasn't true, we know that it was a lie, actually the memory of it being a lie can get lost separate to the memory of the thing that we've been told. And so we can actually go on believing a lie and actually end up believing more in the lie as time goes on, even though we knew at the time that it just wasn't true. So be aware of that as well when you're thinking about this authority bias and something that gets told to you by someone in a position of authority. Because you may go on to believe stuff that's just not true, and if you start making decisions based on that, you could be putting yourself at risk and making yourself a little bit more vulnerable there to some bad decisions and choices. So that's authority bias. I mentioned clipboards and how powerful they can be, and high-vis jackets. and lab coats and how useful all of these things can be. And it all plays a part in something called social engineering, influencing people socially. And it's fascinating stuff. And if you want to know a bit more about that, keep an eye out on my podcast in a few weeks' time, about 4 weeks' time probably from now, where the episode was between myself and Paul Newton, who is from Mental Theft. So he is a performer, but he also has spent a lot of his time hacking into and breaking into securities, but not through IT, but through the weaknesses in people more than anything else. And it's absolutely fascinating what he does, and he's very good at it. And we had a lot of chat about that, and in fact it went so well and we chatted about so much stuff that we decided it wasn't enough, and just recording a podcast wasn't good enough. We want to do even more. So it hasn't even been officially announced yet, but I can confirm to those few of you that are watching now live, we are going to be doing a monthly live show with the two of us talking about the mind and people and why we do what we do. So if that's interesting to you, watch this space, and hopefully probably by the start of next week I'll be promoting that as well when we finalise the details. So watch this space. Okay, thanks everyone for tuning in. Great to have you here, and I'll be back again same time next week looking at exploring another cognitive bias and another way that we make the decisions we make. Thanks very much. Have an awesome day.